The Leafs took Freddy the Goat over who? Who went after Dermott? Martin Zirkles wasn't the best pick? That's right. Today, we draft some of the worst Leafs draft whiffs over the last 25 years. It's an incredible list. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. What's happening, Dave? How are you feeling on a Friday?
Feeling pretty good. Can't wait to see what the Jays got up their sleeve against the Dodgers.
Dude, Scherzer, Kershaw, what a pitching matchup we'll have tonight. I'm kind of jealous of the Locked On Jays guys right now.
Yeah.
They got a lot to talk about coming off that absolute thumping over the Rockies. Got a series coming up against Ohtani and the Dodgers. Good time to be a Jays fan, that's for sure. Just a reminder, you can check out the Locked On Blue Jays podcast. You can check out every Toronto-based team here on the Locked On Network, your team every day, including us here daily. We are the Locked On Leafs podcast. And, you know, it's the summer, and sometimes got to get creative and find some things to talk about. And a lot of time kind of looking back on history, you know, whether it's pulling at heartstrings, whether that's kind of goofing on yourself or your team, that's typically what's kind of the fun, you know, entertaining factors of some off-season content. And today I think is kind of a fun little topic that we've stumbled across. Basically, we're doing a draft. Dave and I are going to be doing a draft, and it's really just a way to goof on the Maple Leafs and their terrible drafting history over the course of the last 25 years. So it's another quarter-century list of sorts. And essentially, Dave and I are both, it's a 5-round draft, and we're going to be taking the biggest draft whiffs in Maple Leafs history, or over the last 25 years, I suppose. And essentially, the way that it's going to work is, you know, we have a prospect that we believe was considered a whiff because within 5 picks of that player, a stud came off the board that the Maple Leafs could have had. That's essentially what the criteria is for that. So that's pretty much what we got on tap for you guys today. So why don't we get right into it, Dave? Let's start with that, and then we'll get to this contract efficiency conversation coming up in a little bit. But I want to get right to the draft because I think it's going to be a fun little segment for us to do. So, Dave, I will award you the first pick, the worst draft whiff in Leafs over the last 25 years from the Leafs. Who is it? What is it?
Over the last 25 years? It was actually tough because a lot of candidates.
Dude, there's a lot. I have a list. Like, you talk about a draft board, and this is something that the Maple Leafs probably should have done a little bit better, was put together a draft board. That's what I learned over the course of doing this list. But I got 24 names on my draft board.
I got 22. So
it's deep. It's a deep, deep draft board here of awful selections where good players went off the board within 5 picks of the Leafs making that selection. So I'm curious to see. Let it fly. Who is the worst whiff? Who is worthy of the number 1 pick, Dave?
Well, this goes all the way back to 2016. 30 to open up the draft. This is back when the draft had the first round was 30 picks because we did not have Vegas at the time. So 31st overall, the Leafs decided to take Yegor Korshkov. Korshkov, who played how many games for the Leafs in the NHL, Mike? How many games did he play?
What do you
the 31st overall pick?
Did he play a game? One game?
One game
with the Maple Leafs. That's it.
It's funny. He played one game and he had a goal. So safe to say his sample size, amazing. The problem is that's the only game he played for the Leafs. And then he was gone after that. it still irks me to this day, that pick, because there are quite a few decent players that went after him, but there's one in particular that stands out.
Who's
At
that?
35th overall, the St. Louis Blues selected Jordan Kyrou, Craig Brubase's favorite player. At
Wow.
35th overall. But Jordan Kyrou, who has gone on to play 416 games, has 150 goals, 332 points, which, if my math is correct, more than Igor Korshkov. And funny enough,
Couple more.
probably, and if you look at like his ranking among the players selected in that draft, he is ahead of a lot of players who were selected way before he was. He is just ahead of actually former teammate Tage Thompson. The St. Louis Blues actually had a really good draft to start off. Tage Thompson and Jordan Kyrou.
Yeah, it's a pretty good 1-2 punch in your first and second round. They moved out Tage Thompson and brought in Ryan O'Reilly, went on to win a Stanley Cup. So it's a move that worked out for them. Worked out for Buffalo too. It's one of those rare win-win trades. But yeah, pretty solid first couple of rounds for St. Louis. Then they kind of whiffed. They took Evan Fitzpatrick later on in that draft with the 59th selection. So their second pick in the second round. And he played for Team Canada. I do recall him playing for Canada at the World Juniors. I don't remember if he was any good or not, but I mean, it's a second round pick, so he probably was pretty solid for them. But yeah, that was they took Yegor Korshkov, 31st overall, and coming up after Korshkov, right? So you've got Jordan Kyrou 4 picks later, 5 picks after that. Still in the 30s here is Alex DeBrincat. So it's not just Kyrou. DeBrincat was also a player that the Maple Leafs could have selected over Yegor Korshkov, but obviously elected not to. And keep in mind, I guarantee you, if Kyle Dubas was the GM at the time, and this is still the Lou Lamoriello days, there's no doubt in my mind that Alex DeBrincat would have had way more consideration there at 31. Instead, they went with the big body in Yegor Korshkov, bringing him in from overseas because he was a much bigger man, 6'4", 200 pounds over, Alex DeBrincat. But yeah, that didn't work out. Absolutely. That is a massive whiff. So you're taking the number 1 overall selection, and that's it for you, huh? You're looking at Yegor Korshkov for Jordan Kyrou. That's your selection.
That's my first one. I mean, that's the first one that came to my mind right away.
So it's interesting. Is that what you did, though? Like, did you look through and you're like, okay, who comes to mind right away as like the more obvious ones? Because I looked at every single draft from the year 2000 all the way to 2025, and I went through every single pick and looked at who was selected 5 picks after, and pretty much wrote down a bunch of names that absolutely would have been better selections. And to me, probably the best player who went within 5 picks of a Leaf bust, I would say, Johnny Gaudreau was a player that the Leafs opted to pass on. This was in the 2011 draft. In the 4th round, they took a player. They selected Tom Nielsen, a defenseman who did not play any games for the Toronto Maple Leafs. 4 picks later, the Calgary Flames take Johnny Gaudreau, who went on to have 743 points in 763 games. Should have been far, far more than that. Gone too soon. Obviously, the tragedy last summer with him and his brother. But Johnny Gaudreau, I mean, you could have had him. You could have had him in outside of the top 100 picks as a steal, a 4th round steal. But they had to take Tommy Nilsson. Tom Nilsson was the player they selected that season. I think that's a massive whiff for the Maple Leafs.
Oh, it's a huge whiff. Like, again, they much like a lot of NHL teams at that time, they probably looked at his size. They looked at Gaudreau's size, like, I don't know if we want to deal with that. And then look what happened.
Well, that's the truculence era of the Maple Leafs with Brian Burke, right?
Oh yeah, just, great awareness of truculence at that time.
Yeah, that's the worst draft in NHL history for the Leafs. We've already kind of decided that. There's a couple of names that might pop up from the 2011 NHL draft that the Maple Leafs selected a couple of guys that were just asinine. But we'll continue the list. Those were the first round picks for Dave and I. We'll continue with 4 more selections each as we go through, I guess, what will be considered the top 10 draft whiffs in the last 25 years for the Maple Leafs. So we'll continue the draft next here in the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Have you ever decided to, at the last minute, to head to the ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day. You suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, even invite a bigger group to come with you. Gametime makes it possible. Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Price on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Gametime is the official ticketing partner of the Locked On Network, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming Jays game. And I'm telling you, you can see the views from your seat right in the app before you buy it, so you know exactly where you're going to be sitting in the view that you'll have in those seats. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNHL. You'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you as we are 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday for the remainder of the summer. Then we'll get back to daily coverage, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. Once we get back on the ice for training camp, that's when we'll get back to daily coverage of the Maple Leafs. But for today, not a whole lot going on in Leafland, so we got to kind of get creative. So we're doing our biggest draft whiffs over the last 25 years. We're doing a kind of draft style as well. Dave, with his first round selection, opted to who'd you go with again? Sorry,
Igor Korshkov.
Igor Korshkov, yes, and Jordan Kyrou went 4 picks after him. And for myself, I went with Tom Nilsson, and 4 picks after the Leafs selected Tom Nilsson went Johnny Gaudreau, who went on to score 743 points in 763 games. Not too shabby. And again, should have been plenty more. All right, next round, round 2. What's the next biggest whiff for the Maple Leafs?
So we're gonna go not too far back either. We're gonna go back to 2010. If you may remember, the Leafs did not have a first round pick that year. It went to the Boston Bruins, where they selected good old Tyler Seguin. It's part of the Phil Kessel trade. So the Leafs did not actually have a pick until 40th. Wait, hold on. I gotta get it this right. 43rd overall. 43rd overall, they waited. They had all this time to wait, and they decided, let's take Brad Ross at 43rd overall. Now, okay, it's hard sometimes to get those value picks in the second round. Joke. But only 1, 2, 3, 4 picks later, the Los Angeles Kings selected forward Tyler Toffoli.
Yeah. I had that on my list. I think Toffoli could have been a very useful piece of the puzzle here in Toronto over the last decade. Probably could have used him over Bradley Ross, who did not play a single game for the Maple Leafs.
I wondered if this guy was even a real hockey player at times. Like Brad Ross, were we just like punking ourselves? He did play with the Marlies. Didn't really do much with the Marlies, but he at least did play for the Marlies at one point. Unlike some other draft picks that never actually really amounted to much. But yeah, there was that. You can even go a little further down. And funny enough, Calle Jarnkrok was in that same round. Justin Hall. The Leafs could have just gone for their man right from the get-go and gotten Justin Hall in that round. But no, Brad Ross.
Brad Ross had to be the guy. Had to be the guy. 100% had to be Brad Ross. Yeah, it's a tough one. That's definitely definitely a tough one that they made there. With my next selection, one of the big draft whiffs of all time for the Maple Leafs, certainly in the last 25 years, Freddy the Goat. Frederick Gauthier, selected 21st overall by the Toronto Maple Leafs in 2013. You know who went just 5 picks later? That would be one Shea Theodore. You think Shea Theodore could have been of service to the Maple Leafs over Freddy the Goat, who had 13 goals in 178 games? Yeah, I think so. I do think that Shea Theodore would have been a much better option over a guy like Freddie Gauthier. Andre Burakovsky was in between those two and could have been an option there for Freddie the Goat, over Freddie the Goat, rather. Even Michael McCarron had a much better career over Freddie Goat that went in between those two players as well. So, yeah, Frederick Gauthier, the selection there was puzzling at the time. Like, I remember when he was selected, and you hear from Bob McKenzie, yeah, Frederick Gauthier, is slated to be a third or fourth line center, more of a two-way guy, defensive, big body, and it's like, in the first round, you're going after fourth liners in the first round. What are we doing here? Could have had a top pair defenseman like Shea Theodore, one of the best in the game, one of the best Canadian defensemen we have here at this point in time. But no, they had to go with the big body and go Frederick Gauthier. And man, was that ever a whiff? Because they could have used Shea Theodore. They tried to get Shea Theodore last summer. Remember, he was the package that they tried to get back for Mitch Marner, and they said, nah, we'd rather keep Theodore. And then they get Marner a year later. So now they have Theodore and Marner. The Leafs could have had Theodore and Marner all these years. But no, they had to go and get Fred Gauthier.
It irks me so much because that was clearly a pick that was about the role rather than the player. Like, usually you say you pick the best player. But the Leafs were like, no. We need a fourth line center. Could maybe be a third line center. But no, this guy was a fourth line center.
But here's the thing. This was back in 2013. I'm going to pull up what that team looked like in 2013, the Maple Leafs. Now, I suppose, actually, that was the year that they made the playoffs. That was the year they made the playoffs, because that'd be the 12-13 draft. So they did make the playoffs that year. But defensively, I don't know if this is a team where you looked at and you're like, yeah, they're set. They're set on the blue line. They had Cody Franzen, Dion Phaneuf, Carl Gunnarsson, John Michael Lyles, Mark Fraser, a young Jake Gardner, Corbinian Holzer, Mike Koska. Like, none of these names scream, whoa, we're good on the blue line. Let's go and get a fourth liner in Fred Gauthier. No, they still could have used a potential top 4 defenseman a la Shea Theodore, and they did not make that selection. So yeah, that will forever go down as one of the more brutal picks in Maple Leafs draft history.
Yeah, there's not many that would probably top that one in my opinion, but I do have one that's actually not far off.
All right. What's your next selection?
We're going to go back a little bit. 2009. The Leafs were terrible at drafting in 2009. The Leafs took two players in the second round of the 2009 draft. One was Kenny Ryan, and the other one was Jesse Blacker.
Yeah.
Do you want to know? Can I get a twofer on this one? Because I feel like it's needed.
Yeah, I know the players, the defensemen particularly that you're referring to, and I'll allow it. Yeah.
Kenny Ryan was selected at 50th overall. In the following pick, Brian Dumoulin. After that, Richard Panik, former Leaf, by the way. And then a few more picks down at 55th, Dmitry Orlov. 3 players I listed off the bat that were selected after Kenny Ryan. And then Jesse Blacker was selected 58th overall. Right after him, Brandon Peary had a way better career than Jesse Blacker. Also, Jesse Blacker, from what it looks like, Pretty sure he scored a goal in his first NHL game, but otherwise didn't really do much after that.
Mm-hmm.
And then a pick right after Brandon Peary, Thomas Tatar.
Ta-ta. Yeah.
And actually, a little further down the list, right at I'm going to sneak one last player. He's a little after 5.
Tyson Barrie. Yeah. He doesn't count. He's a little bit further, but yeah, it just goes to show like that. Those are the players that were available, and they were like, no, we're gonna go after Jesse Blackard. No, we're gonna go. We think Kenny Ryan is gonna be the guy. Like, that's a second round pick you're wasting there on someone who never played a single game for your franchise. Like, I remember Kenny Ryan. I was doing play-by-play in the ECHL for the Brampton Beasts coming out of college. Kenny Ryan was playing in the East Coast League at that point. Like, what year was this? 2010? So we're talking
2009.
2009. Okay, so this would have been 2017. So 8 years after being drafted, he should have been entering his prime at age 25. Unfortunately, did not quite develop the way he was supposed to, and Kenny Ryan was playing in the East Coast League. There ain't nothing wrong with that. That's a hell of a lot better than anything that I will ever accomplish as a hockey player. But you think about the players that they could have had instead. Yeah, Dumoulin, Orlov would have been much better selections for those guys. That's a good one. I had that on my list as well. So yeah, Kenny Ryan over Dumoulin and Orlov. All right. Gross. So my next selection. This one I thought was actually pretty awful, and it's another one of those ones where it's like it was right after the selection here. So the Maple Leafs, with the 79th pick in the 2010 NHL entry draft, selected a fella by the name of Sondre Olden. You ever heard of that name?
No.
Neither did I until this exercise. Sondre Olden obviously never played a game in the NHL. I don't even know if Sondre Olden played a single game overseas, to be completely honest with you. He very well could have just had his entire career playing over in Europe, and I guess he did play. Hold on, let me try and pull this up really quickly. I had it here, and now he's not. He was a Norwegian player, played for Norway growing up. He came over, played 1 year with the Erie Otters in the OHL, and then went back overseas and never, ever made his way over to North America for any amount of pro hockey. You know who went with the very next pick? Sondre Olden. With the 79th selection, the Leafs select Sondre Olden. With the 80th selection in the 2010 NHL draft, the Pittsburgh Penguins select Brian Rust. Brian Rust went the very next pick. Talk about taking the wrong guy. I mean, they played the same position. They're both forwards, both wingers at the time. And they went with Brian Rust, or they went with Olden over Rust. Brian Rust has gone on to win 2 Stanley Cups, Dave. 2 Stanley Cups. Brian Rust has gone on to play 638 games in the NHL. He's gone on to score over 200 goals in the NHL. Yeah, that was a whiff. A big whiff. So Olden over Rust. That's my next selection.
Yeah, it's a pretty bad one there. Yeah, there are just so many players that you could have said, like, you could have made the name. I would have been like, yeah, no clue. Oh, the Leafs just, I was just they shot the shot, didn't work.
I was about to throw out a name. I'll throw a name because he's not one that I'm going to use here.
Okay.
But how about the name Jamie Devane?
Oh, I know. Oh, that one I know very well.
Okay. What about Dale Mitchell?
Can I go with Dale Mitchell because he's actually my next pick?
Oh, really? Okay, yeah. Please. Here
Dale
it
Mitchell,
is.
2007 was drafted at 74th overall. Okay, 74th overall, so that's the 3rd round. I actually have 2 players that the Leafs could have picked within the 5 picks limit that we have here. There's a player that was drafted by the Tampa Bay Lightning at 77th overall. One Alex Killorn. He of 2 Stanley Cup titles, 50 games away from 1,000. Pretty
Impressive.
Pretty impressive. 539 points in 950 games. It's pretty much better than Dale Mitchell. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, I would say.
And then shoot, the Leafs missed out on Killorn. Well, if they needed a defenseman, a scrappy defenseman, right after Robert Bortuzzo.
Ooh, Bobby Bortuzzo, yeah.
577 games. Better than the 0 that Dale Mitchell played when he was a member of the Leafs. And I'm just going to double check here because I know the name Dale Mitchell. I remember that pick. And I do remember that
I do not
barely played for the Marlies. I can actually probably just do the mental math right now. He went on to play less than he played, is that right?
He played a few years with the Marlies, a bunch of years in the East Coast League before going over to Denmark, and then
9 games, 49 games, and then 2 games. Like his best season was 49 games. He had 13 points.
62 games he played in the American Hockey League. So 60 of them were played with the Marlies. Yeah.
Not good.
No, not really.
He actually had half decent numbers when he was in the OHL with the Oshawa Generals.
Yeah, and the Spitties, like his look at that. Like Oshawa Generals, 06, 07, put up 43 goals in 67 games, 80 points. I believe that was his draft year. Was it not his draft year at that year? He's an 07 pick. That would have been 06, 07. Yeah, so his draft year went off. 43 goals, 80 points in 67 games. And they think, man, he's a young, talented player. A little bit of a smaller guy. But, we think we got a guy here in Dale Mitchell. No, didn't turn out to be, unfortunately. But, Killorn, he turned out to be okay. Bobby Bortuzzo turned out to be okay. So they definitely whiffed on that one. All right, I'll give you my 4th selection, then we'll take a break, and we'll come back with our final selections for the biggest whiffs in the last 25 years for Maple Leafs draft history. Coming in at number 4 for me, my 4th selection, the 34th pick in the 2015 NHL draft was Travis Dermott, who had a decent career with Toronto, played 5 years for him, over 250 games as a Maple Leaf. But the player that went right after him in the 2015 draft, Carolina Hurricanes number 1 center, Sebastian Aho. Could you imagine if the Maple Leafs were able to come away from that draft with Marner in the 1st round, Aho in the 2nd round, and then come back the next year, win the lottery, get Austin Matthews. They already had William Nylander in the mix. Like, think about how much better this team would be if they would have had Sebastian Aho in the fold down the middle. Oh, what a miss. What a whiff. Dermott did not turn out to be the defenseman they thought he'd be. Aho clearly would have been the better selection. Also was a big need at the time. They didn't really have much down the middle. That was pre-Matthews. Like, that team was terrible up the center of the ice. Tyler Bozak was their number 1 center at that time. Nazem Kadri, I guess, would have also been, maybe their number 1, number 2 center. They could have used a big-time centerman, and they did not. They went with a defenseman, and, well, the rest is history. Dermott, not really cutting it in the NHL. I believe he spent most of the season in the American League this year. Aho, yeah, he's making quite frequent trips to the Eastern Conference Finals, the captain of the Carolina Hurricanes.
Yeah, I liked the Dermott pick because I didn't really know much about Sebastian Aho, and then you look at what Sebastian Aho ended up turning out to be. I'm like, but what also people need to remember with that pick is that the Leafs weren't actually supposed to make that pick. They traded back into that spot. Do you know who was drafted with that pick, Mike?
Was that the Konechny pick?
That was the Konechny pick.
Yeah.
That was the double whammy on that one.
Yeah. So they traded back, gave up Konechny, and then they decided we're going to go with Travis Dermott with this selection instead of Sebastian Aho. So they could have had either of those two players. Yeah. Instead, they ended up with Dermott. Not the finest decision for the Maple Leafs.
You bring up Aho, but not long after the Aho pick was also Brandon Carlo.
Who eventually made his way over to Toronto, right?
Playing more NHL games than Travis Dermott right now.
He certainly has. I mean, that's one of the best drafts like in the modern era. Like, Eric Chernak has turned out a far better contract or a better career than Dermott. He ended up going in that first round, right? Mackenzie Blackwood has had a decent career. He ended up going that round. Rupe Hintz was a second round pick there. Rasmus Anderson was a second round pick in that draft. Vince Dunn. Like, there's a number of defensemen specifically. Like, if they wanted to go defenseman, there's like a number of guys after Dermott that churned out far better careers than Dermott did. So to me, big whiff. And it really kind of cost this team. And they've been looking for they were looking for a partner for Riley for years, and maybe Dermott could have been that, or at least been in the top 4. But didn't happen. All right, Dave, we got one more selection each. We'll take a break. We'll come back and we'll get to it to finish off the draft. So that's coming up next here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you as always. We are doing our Friday draft, Low Friday 5, taking a look at the biggest draft whiffs by the Maple Leafs in the last 25 years. So just to recap of the whiffs that we have already taken off the board, we're doing this in a draft format. Yegor Korshkov was considered a whiff because who went a couple picks later? Jordan Kyrou. Brad Ross was selected by the Maple Leafs. A couple picks later, Tyler Toffoli. Kenny Ryan was a second-round selection of the Maple Leafs back in 2009. A few picks later, Dmitry Orlov and who's the other defenseman? It was Orlov and somebody else.
Brian Dumoulin.
Orlov and Dumoulin. And then Dale Mitchell is a selection of the Maple Leafs, had a pretty good draft year in the OHL. Couple picks later, Alex Killorn and Bobby Bortuzzo come off the board. Far more superior NHL careers than Dale Mitchell, who sadly had no NHL career. Pro career, played in the minors, but didn't quite make the NHL. Myself, I had Tom Nilsson, who was a 4th-round pick of the Maple Leafs back in 2011. Couple picks later, Johnny Gaudreau was selected by the Calgary Flames. Probably would have preferred Gaudreau on this roster over Nilsson over the last decade. Freddy the Goat, y'all remember him? 5 picks later, Shea Theodore comes off the board. Top pair defenseman for a Stanley Cup winning team. Shea Theodore could have been a Maple Leaf, but no, they needed to have the GOAT on the team. Olden, I forget his first name. I just wrote down Olden, but it was Olden who was selected in the 3rd round back in, I believe it was 2014. I can look it up. Hold on, I got my notes here right now. All right, Sondre Olden.
I was going to say, start with an S, but I don't want to.
Sondre Olden in 2010. I thought it was a made-up name when I first read it. Brian Rust was the very next pick of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Had a much better career. In fact, he actually played 638 more games and has 200 some odd more goals than Sondre Olden, who doesn't have a single game played or a goal scored in the NHL or in North America at the professional level at that. So that was one for me. And then passing on Sebastian Aho to take Travis Dermott, another massive mistake and whiff by Maple Leafs draft and Maple Leafs management. We have one more selection apiece here, Dave. Who rounds out your list here?
I am really hoping, because I have some really good ones right now. So I'm really hoping that you take one of the ones on my list because I really want to get to this one. Because you brought up the Olden pick. And I said, you know what? I have one that's very similar criteria to yours.
Mm-hmm.
In round 5 of the 2012 NHL draft.
2012. Okay.
Okay. Who would you think is the best goaltender in the NHL right now? If you had to give, who's the best goaltender in your mind?
Like Shesterkin, Vasilevsky, like one of those guys, I guess. Maybe Hellebuck, yes.
Okay,
Is Hellebuck the name you're looking for?
You bring Connor Hellebuck to the list.
Okay,
because he was selected in the 5th round at 130th overall. The Leafs had the 126th overall pick in that draft. Do you remember the name Dominic Toninato?
Toninato?
Toninato? Does that ring a bell?
I remember the name. More so from playing like the NHL video games and him being on the Marlies roster, not the Leafs roster. But yes, I do recall. That's tough to hear that they could have had Connor Hellebuck all these years. Instead, they drafted a guy named Toninato instead.
Yeah, that was a bad one. That was a bad one in terms of what could have been in that round. Can I bring up one more? I have to bring up this one though.
Well, hang on. What if it's my draft? What if it's my pick? We can do our honorable mentions afterwards. Okay, I got a list of 22 guys here. 24 guys here.
I'm sorry.
We got honorable mentions. Okay. We can get there. I don't know who I want to take though, because I've got a number of guys here that we could select. Yeah, I'm with you. There's just so many terrible selections. Okay, I'm gonna go with this one here. Okay, because I teased him. I teased this one. Martin Zirkles. Remember Martin Zirkles? Is that the one that you were going to bring up?
That was one of the ones I was going to bring up, but I have I have another honorable mention. So
yeah, Martin Zirkles was selected in the 3rd round, and a couple picks later, a fella by the name of Anthony Cirelli was drafted by the Tampa Bay Lightning. Anthony Cirelli's turned out to be one of the premier two-way forwards in the NHL, an absolute shutdown menace, 2-time Stanley Cup champion. Guy's a beast, scored 27 goals a year ago, career high. He's a stud. We all know that he's a stud. And the Maple Leafs, man, could they ever have used a Cirelli mold over the course of the last 5, 6, 7 years since he's broken into the NHL. Making the selection in 2015, electing to instead go with Martin Zirkles will always haunt Maple Leafs management, because Zirkles did not play a single game in the NHL. Not a single game. Cirelli's got 2 cups, and he plays a very impactful role with the Tampa Bay Lightning in doing so. 1 gold for Canada at the 4 Nations. Probably going to be on the radar for Team Canada at the Olympics. Mm-hmm. Could have been a Maple Leaf. He was right there for the picking. Pick number 68 could have been Anthony Cirelli. Instead, he drops to 72, and the Tampa Bay Lightning say thank you very much to all teams, all 4 of those clubs in between that let him drop there. That's the Tampa Bay, or the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Columbus Blue Jackets, the Philadelphia Flyers, and the Colorado Avalanche all passed on Cirelli, and he went to the Lightning, and they never looked back. That is a massive whiff.
You know what's the worst part about that? We brought up the Konechny-Dermott trade.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the picks that the Leafs also got in that trade.
Oh, no. Oh, so they could have had Aho and Cirelli. Like, Matthews, Aho, Cirelli is what they ultimately could have had. They could have had that.
Oh, good. And like, do you remember who else was a part of that trade? I do, because it was one other player that the Leafs I was like, oh, the Leafs got quite a few picks. This is gonna go really well.
Ooh, was that Bracco? Was Bracco?
Yeah, Bracco was the final one on that one. I'm just like,
man, they whipped on all three of them, eh? Dermott, Bracco, and Zirkles for Travis Konechny, essentially, is what that trade turned out to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I would consider a loss in the trade category.
It's just so funny because so many people were bringing that up at the time, how much they fumbled and they shouldn't have traded out. They should have just taken Konechny.
Great draft, man. That was a great draft.
Give Dermott a chance, guys. David, shut up. You're wrong. Konechny was the guy.
Yeah, he was. He was the guy. Who are a couple honorable mentions that popped on your list here that you didn't get to draft?
Well, I have to think of the chosen one back in 2004, 90th overall, Justin Pogge.
Oh, yeah, I saw this one.
Remember when we picked Justin Pogge to be the guy over Tuukka Rask?
I recall. I do recall that.
Do you ever know who went one pick right after Justin Pogge?
Alex Edler. Yeah, that's on my list. That's why I know. But I did not know.
And there was another goalie that was picked not long after. Thomas Greiss.
Yeah, had a good career.
Played a lot more than Justin Pogge did. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, that's one bad decision in net. How about Ian Scott? One pick ahead of Jeremy Swayman, and apparently, remember, it was a couple years ago. Swayman was on a podcast and he was telling the story. He was convinced that the Leafs were going to take him.
Yep,
and he had been told that they were going to take him. And all of a sudden, pick 110 rolls around, and they take Ian Scott, and he's like, "Whoa, what the hell happened? I thought I was going to be a Maple Leaf. I thought they were going to draft me." Well, the very next pick, the Boston Bruins swoop in to be the heroes to stop the Swayman slide. With pick 111, Jeremy Swayman comes off the board. Just one selection after Ian Scott. Now, Scott's career, obviously, he had to retire early due to injury. So, what could have been, I guess,
CHL goal of the year. So
yeah, I mean, at the time, it was a good pick. Like, let's not act like, but that's but in hindsight, which is why we're calling him whiffs. At the time, you could talk me into any of these selections. Well, most of the selections. There's a few there that I still don't quite understand. But like that one, sure. Like there's a track record of success there for Scott, and Swayman, kind of an unknown NCAA goalie, I guess. Like we'll see what he turns into. But clearly, Swayman, the much better goalie, and the Leafs should have stuck to their word and went with Swayman over Scott. Because we'd have a Wall-Swayman duo tandem right now if that were the case. Because Wall was selected a year before, and then Swayman would have been kind of the next guy the following season, but didn't happen. So that's another honorable mention that I had here. Daniel Brodin was a selection for the Maple Leafs in 2010. The very next pick, Brendan Gallagher. Brendan Gallagher, pick 147. Daniel Brodin, pick 146. Could add Brendan Gallagher in a Leafs uniform all these years. Imagine how different his career would have been if he was a Leaf instead of a Hab. How much more you would have loved the guy instead of absolutely hated him.
True. I got one last one here because it's a very obscure one. Back in 2003, we're going way back. The Leafs took a defenseman, John Doherty.
Yep.
Later on in pick 62, 5 picks later, David Backes.
Yep. I had that one on my list too. Could have had David Backes. Did you happen to see who went a few picks after Andreas Janssen? Did you get to that one?
I did not get to that one.
Andreas Janssen had an okay career, right? I think you could say it's decent. Like him and Travis Dermott played a couple of years. Although I would imagine the Maple Leafs would have preferred if they would have instead took a guy by the name of Mackenzie Weegar in the 7th round. Probably. I think Mackenzie Weegar may have been the better selection in hindsight over Andreas Janssen. How about JJ Pinchinich? Remember that name? JJ Pinchinich, the London Knights. Yeah. He was Mitch Marner's teammate, Kachuk's teammate, right? He was a good player and junior. never amounted to anything in the NHL. You know, went a couple picks after him. Devon Toews. Devon Toews, 4th round pick for the Islanders. Couple picks after JJ Pinchnich. I think Devon Toews would look pretty nice in a Maple Leaf uniform right now, and would have over the course of the last 10 years. There's a lot of names, man. I could go all day. They took Timothy Liljegren. 2 picks later, Robert Thomas comes off the board after Timothy Liljegren. How about Riley Stotts? Remember that name, Riley Stotts?
I had that one on my list too.
Yeah, 3rd round pick, not too long ago, only like 4 or 5 years ago. Maybe 6 years ago. Lucas Dostal went a couple picks after that. That one, again, little tough. Here's one more for you that I think was a tough one that nearly cracked my list, but ultimately did not. But you're looking at Eric Noddle. Mike Hoffman was taken a pick later after Eric Noddle. Jamie Devane, I brought him up earlier. Riley Smith was the following selection after Jamie Devane. So there's a lot of these fun little ones where the Maple Leafs just completely whiffed on the draft, and some good players came off the board within a few picks of that selection. Max Emerson was a Leaf draft pick. Andre Palat went 3 picks later. Tough decision to go.
2011, Tyler Biggs, Stuart Percy. You could have easily had Rickard Rakell and Philip Deneau instead.
Yep. Yeah. Over both of those. That draft is still the worst draft in history. Like that's the same draft as Tom Nilsson over Johnny Gaudreau. So you could have had, if you would have made the correct, picks in a redraft, you could have had Phil Deneau over Tyler Biggs, Rickard Rakell over Stu Percy, and then you could have had Johnny Gaudreau over Tom Nilsson. Could you imagine if this team had Gaudreau, Deneau, and Rickard Rakell?
Or the Leafs could have kept their picks and not traded up for Tyler Biggs.
And took Rakell and John Gibson.
They could have had Rakell and John Gibson. And then Johnny Gaudreau on top of that. Oh, my God. Why is this team? Yeah. I really hope that. I mean, they've gone up. It's looking better now.
Actually, and Deneau, because they also had the Stu Percy pick.
They did.
They could have Deneau also.
Christ.
Oh, it's interesting. I know. It's the Maple Leafs have had some. I'm sure if you did this for every team.
And that's the thing too, guys. We're only doing this because it's a fun Leaf exercise, but you could do this for a lot of teams.
Oh,
there are so many whips out there.
Dude, we love to clown on the Bruins. Just go look at the Bruins 2015 draft. Go look at the what was it? Zach Senshin, Jake DeBrusk, and was that the defenseman? Yeah, Jacob Zaboral. And then right after that, Matt Barzal, Kyle Connor, Thomas Chabot. Boom, boom, boom. And then like Brock Besser and Travis Konechny and Kaprizov, I think, was in that draft too. Like, it was just the 2015 draft is stacked, absolutely stacked. The Maple Leafs ended up getting a pretty good player themselves. There's no longer with the team in Mitch Marner, but it's a fun little exercise. I enjoyed kind of looking back and going through some of the names, some of the whiffs and busts, and what could have beens for the Maple Leafs if they would have drafted perfectly. But no team draft perfect. There's obviously every team we could do this exercise for and clown on them too. But we're the Locked On Leafs podcast, not Locked On any other squad. So that does it for us today. We'll get to this contract efficiency thing on Monday. We'll kick it down the curb to Monday instead. That'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys on Monday. Enjoy your weekends. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.